So welcome and introduce yourself to us. Thank you.
Great. Can everyone hear me now? Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited to be here with everyone. As you just heard, I'm Dr. Robbie Goldstein. I am a physician. I'm an infectious disease doctor at Mass General Hospital, and I'm running to be the next representative for Congress in the 8th District of Massachusetts. I've been in this race since November, and since the beginning, I have been saying the same phrase at the start of my speech, which is something that has taken on tremendous meaning over the past 2 months. I keep saying that I am in this race to fight for access, equity, and opportunity for every person in every community all across this district. I am excited to be here with you tonight. I'm excited to do 3 things with you. The first is that I want to introduce myself because I think there's a lot of people on the Zoom call tonight who probably have not met me yet. So I'll tell you a little bit about who I am, where I come from. The second is that I want to share with you my values. I want to share with you what I believe in and how I lead in the hospital and how I'll lead in Washington. And then the third thing is that I want to have a conversation. So hopefully we can open this up, have some questions, have a discussion. I can hear from you about the challenges that you're facing, the issues that are on your mind, and we can talk together about the next steps forward. So let's start with me and the background. I grew up in a small town in upstate New York. My dad was a dentist in the town, and my mom managed the office. And it was truly a family business that they were running. My sister and I would go there after school every day, every weekend, all summer long, and we'd help out. And when we'd be there in the office, what we saw was that my parents were caring for their community. They were every single day investing in their neighbors. And the work that they did inspires me every single day today. I came here to Massachusetts 20 years ago to go to college. I went to Tufts University, and I stayed to get my MD and my PhD before going over to Mass General to do training in internal medicine and then infectious diseases. And throughout all of that training, all of that education, I knew what I wanted to do was what my parents did. I wanted to care for communities. And in particular, I wanted to care for those people that were most left out from the system, the people that were most vulnerable. And so I made the decision to become a primary care doctor. And I became a doc for folks living with HIV, people in the LGBTQ community, communities affected by substance use. And now over the past 10 years, I've built a practice that I'm so proud of. It's a practice where I get to sit one-on-one every day with patients, hear about the stories in their lives, address the barriers to their care, and talk to them about the challenges that they're facing. I've recognized, especially over the past 4 years, that the challenges they're facing are so much larger than what a physician can deal with in the exam room. These are challenges that require change at the federal level to actually address them. Across this district and across Massachusetts, there are thousands of people that are living without health insurance. But I think more importantly, there are even more that are living with food insecurity, housing instability, can't access a job that pays a living wage, can't access a transportation system that works for them. Those are the challenges that my patients tell me about every single day. And that's what I think truly requires a fresh perspective. I think in this district, it is time for a fresh perspective on healthcare, one that's grounded in the fundamental truth that healthcare is a human right and not a benefit for people who can pay for it. I think it's also time for a fresh perspective on equality, one that asserts the importance of a woman's right to choose, one that brings justice back into our criminal legal system, and one that understands how race and ethnicity compound in so many different ways to impact someone's access to housing and financial security and education, and certainly to healthcare. And I think fundamentally, it is time for a fresh perspective on the role of government itself, one that is not afraid of bold leadership and structural change to address all of these challenges I'm talking about and everything that I hear from my patients, including things like climate change and gun violence, and certainly racial injustice and the COVID-19 pandemic. I got into this race because I think this district deserves a representative that shares its values and isn't afraid to lead with those values every single day in Washington. I want to tell you one other thing about myself, and then we can open this up for a broader discussion, and that's about my work in the hospital. I'm proud of everything that I get to do in the hospital, but especially of what I get to do with the LGBTQ community. As a primary care doctor, I saw every day how trans and non-binary folks faced violence, prejudice, social and economic marginalization, and I recognized that I had to do something about it. And so 5 years ago, I established the Transgender Health Program at Mass General Hospital, and I now direct the program, and with my colleagues, I'm able to provide high quality, personalized care to a group of folks that had been left out of our system for far too long. And that work of identifying gaps, building coalitions, and then driving the solution forward, that's the way I approach every single day in the hospital. It's how I want to approach every single day in Washington as well. So that's me. I don't want to take up any more time because I really want to go through your questions and have a conversation. So I'll end there, and hopefully we can open up the floor.
Please. Okay, please raise your hand, and our administrators, Melissa and Noel, will signal when you are available to speak.
I think the first question goes to John Kane, who I will find and unmute now.
Welcome. Did you hear my welcome? Welcome.
We did, yes.
I'm going to ask you the same question I'm going to ask Senator Lynch. My question is, what is the probability of renewed funding for working families and folks that received unemployment? What is your, what is the probability of our getting renewed funding?
Are you referencing currently right now in the COVID-19 pandemic and the
Yes,
economic recession?
Families receive paychecks that help get them through this cycle, and we're at the end of the cycle for unemployment as well as the families. So what is your view of the probability that it will happen again and in a timely fashion?
You know, as someone who's not down there in Washington right now, it's hard for me to read what is happening in that chamber and what the probability is of Democrats and Republicans coming together and passing a bill. But I'll tell you that I think we need it. 100% we need to extend what happened back in March and April to make sure that working class families can continue to receive the benefits that they need to get through this terrible healthcare crisis and this economic recession. There were a lot of really important things that happened in March and April, including extension of unemployment benefits and augmenting unemployment benefits, including placing a deferral on student loan payments for so many people that are paying their student loans, including increased funding for food security and SNAP benefits, and some things that weren't included back in March and April that we need to include now in the second round of stimulus and funding, actually the fourth round of stimulus and funding. That's things like securing people's health care. And we just found out yesterday, 5.4 million Americans lost their health care because of COVID-19 and because our healthcare in this country is linked to employment. We need to make sure that in the middle of the largest public health crisis this country has ever seen, we are guaranteeing healthcare to everyone in this country. So I don't know if I can tell you, and perhaps the congressman can, I'm not sure if I can tell you how Democrats and Republicans are going to come together and how they're going to get a bill on the desk of the president, but I can tell you 100% they must do it. They must be in Washington now until they were able to get this bill done to make sure that working class families all across America have what they need, both what they were able to receive for the past 4 months and what they should be receiving for the next 6 months as we go through this crisis.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Goldstein. Thank you, John. I think the next question goes to Danielle Kemp, who I will find. Danielle, and then after Danielle, just so folks know, it's Winnie was next, and then Bob LaRocca will be after Winnie.
Hi, Dr. Goldstein.
Hey,
I wanted to know, if you're elected, what will you do to help the disabilities community in Massachusetts? I know as a doctor, you have a unique perspective.
Yes, yeah. Thank you for the question. A really important question. I think we have a lot of work to do that was undone before we entered this COVID crisis, and we have work to do that has come from the COVID crisis. So let's talk about what was undone, right? One of the things that was undone is that the Empower Care Act is sitting in the House of Representatives right now. It's a bipartisan bill. It has support from Democrats and Republicans, not from Congressman Lynch, though, as far as I can tell. It's a bipartisan bill to extend the money follows the person program, right? To make sure that we have the money and the funds that we need to get people out of institutionalized care and bring them back home, bring them back to their communities. And as a physician, that is the type of program to me that is gonna both make people healthier. It's also gonna save us money in the long run. It is the right thing to do. It is the smart thing to do. And it's the thing we have to push forward with. That wasn't done before COVID, unfortunately. And I think we've got to keep pushing for that to happen. I'd like to see that happen before I get there in January, but if it doesn't, I will push for it to happen in January 2021. I think we also have to think about what's been happening with COVID, right? When we go back to those beginning days of COVID, back in March and April, we had appropriate and robust discussions about vulnerable populations in the setting of COVID. And we talked about people who are incarcerated, people experiencing homelessness, elderly individuals who were in nursing facilities. And we did not pay enough attention to those that are disabled and those that may be in facilities because they're disabled, those that may have skilled nursing that comes into the home, those that require people to help support them, and they may be at increased risk for COVID. And so we've got to make sure that as we continue to face this crisis, it's not going away. We know that, right? We see 40 states in this country with increasing rates of cases still. We've got to make sure that we are thinking about all vulnerable populations and including those that are disabled in that conversation. So I'd like to see, if we go back to that first question, as we start to think of this next stimulus package, what are we going to do specifically to help out those that have skilled nursing coming to the home? Those that may need to still be in an institutionalized setting or in a congregate setting? How do we make sure that they have the testing they need, the personal protective equipment they need, everything they need to be safe in this crisis?
Great, thank you. And our next question goes to Winnie, who I will unmute now.
Oh, Winnie, we can't hear you yet.
I think I might have, okay, here we go.
There we go.
There you go.
Thank you first of all, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate that a lot. My question has to do with wages. Something I learned being an old union person was that almost 100 years ago, in the West End of England, they discovered that the reason why people were poor wasn't because they didn't work, because usually they worked 15, 16, 17 hours a day, similar to what people are doing now. But what they discovered, and this was over 100 years ago, is that the employers were not paying them a wage that would allow them to have a decent quality of life. My concern with that is the minimum wage. Massachusetts did, in fact, allow a minimum wage to go up as slow and as pathetically, well, in my opinion, I apologize, as pathetically as slow as they possibly could. Because I'm retired, but I have a part-time job that's minimum wage. And the thought that of the amount of work that I'm doing and the amount of work that I'm putting in, I scratch my head going, you're retired, why are you doing this? But seeing what people are living on, and it is painful to watch. They're putting up housing all over Quincy, God bless them. None of them will be available to anybody living on a minimum wage. So my big concern, and it's something that's near and dear to my heart, is once you're elected and you have this ability to encourage change, what could you or would you be considering the change in the United States of having a minimum wage that is a living wage?
Yeah. It's an amazing question, and thank you for asking that. I think there are three things that I want to address with this. The first is I want to say that it is unacceptable that people in this country can be working and not make enough money to live. And we have to guarantee an increase in the minimum wage all across this country to a living wage. We must guarantee that as a country, right? And that is going to take political will, it's going to take advocacy, it's going to take leadership, it's going to take people fighting for that every single day. But I am in that fight because it's the right thing to do. And it is the only way for people to be able to live in this country and put food on the table, have a roof over their head, have the healthcare they need. Financial security is so central to everything that we do. So we have to have that fight to increase the minimum wage all across this country, and not just state by state by state. I think the second thing I want to talk about is that right now we're seeing in the setting of COVID how important financial security is and how risky things can be when you're furloughed, when you're fired because the company shuts down or the restaurant has to close, when unemployment benefits may not be extended beyond the end of this month. And there are bills in front of the House right now and in front of the Senate looking at emergency cash relief in the setting of COVID-19. And I think we have to have a serious conversation about doing that right now. I think I am fully in favor of emergency cash relief in the setting of this pandemic and the setting of this emergency, so that we can guarantee people can put food on the table and pay their rent or their mortgage. But then also thinking about how do we use those data from that experience to think about a basic income going forward. And then I think the third thing I need to say is that there's a huge problem here that, yes, we need to increase people's wages and we've got to get the minimum wage up higher. But we also have to think about where's all that money going that people are spending, right? Housing is too expensive. Healthcare is too expensive. A college education is too expensive. And we have to put in the policies and move forward with the progressive platform that will make college affordable for everyone, that will eliminate student loan debts for those people that are drowning in their student loan debt, that will increase the support we give for people who need more for food security, that will make sure that we have more affordable housing in this country. So we can certainly advocate and fight, and I will, for an increased minimum wage, but we've also got to fight for the other piece to make life more affordable for everyone and to guarantee healthcare, housing, and food security for everyone in this country.
Just if I may add, if you look at the top people who are now the 1%ers, like Bezos and Warren and the Walton family, they could easily not only give better than a minimum wage, they could give a defined benefit pension to every one of their employees and not see a drop in the bucket. And this is what really creams my corn, if I may.
Great phrase, I like it. But you're right, right? Like these are people who have amassed enormous wealth because of the American worker. They have amassed enormous ability to use their money because of the American worker. And it is their responsibility. It is part of the social contract of this country, of this nation, for them to pay that back in and to make sure that everyone in this country has access to what we think are universal rights: housing, healthcare, food security, education. Those are things that everyone should have access to.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for the question, Winnie. And now we're going to go to Bob LaRocca. If I can find him. There you are, Bob. Great.
Hi, Doctor. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I want to also thank you. I know you're a supporter of the Voter Protection Corps where I work, and I really appreciate that. So obviously, voting rights are central in this election and in everyone, so I appreciate that. But my question is totally different. And this is less of a policy question. And I'm the father to a 4-year-old, and my wife and I on almost every day are debating and thinking about what are we going to do in the fall, and what are we going to do with daycare, and if the daycare opens, or if my wife does or does not go back to work, like what do we do? And I asked this question less from a policy perspective because I think there's maybe some solutions there, but I ask it more from like a national leadership perspective. And do you have any thoughts about like how our leaders can be doing a better job of helping us to sort out some of these really difficult questions about how we live our lives with the pandemic moving forward, and specifically about reopening of schools?
I'll take this as an opportunity to say, I think we need some new leaders in Washington. I think that we need some people that we can trust. I think we need people who have expertise and people who can instill confidence in America, in the folks of Massachusetts, certainly in the people across the 8th district, because there's tremendous fear of sending kids back to school and sending kids back to daycare. And I think we have to weigh the risks and the benefits very carefully. We have to recognize that kids do better when they're in school, when they're able to be educated by professionals who have been trained in how to go through a curriculum, when they are able to have social interaction with other kids, when they're able to have that experience, right? That is a benefit for our kids, and we've got to try to get back to that place. But we also have to recognize that there is a possibility that people may transmit the virus when they start going out of their homes. How do you make sure a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old or even a 15-year-old wears a mask all day long on the school bus, walking through the halls, in the cafeteria, and in all of the classrooms? And so, I think this comes down to making sure that people that are elected, the leaders at the national level, at the state level, at the municipal level, are really those people that understand data and are using data to drive decisions. Now, I think if we look here in Massachusetts, we have done a tremendous amount of work to decrease transmissions in the state. And we are looking at very low numbers of new cases every single day. And if things stay like this, we should be able to have faith and confidence in our leaders to interpret those data and turn that into a school policy, a daycare policy that allows these places to open safely. And for us to have confidence that we can put our kids on the bus, get them to school, and know they'll have masks, they'll have personal protective equipment, they'll have sanitation that they need, and they'll have very low numbers of COVID floating around in Massachusetts. But I also think we need to recognize that, well, on the flip side, we have to trust our leaders that if the numbers start to tick up, if the numbers start to increase, if we see more and more cases, that we will have to pull back, and we will have to go back to virtual education. We'll have to go back to most people working from home, daycare shutting down. Mm-hmm. That all takes faith and trust, right? You've got to be able to look to the people who are leading you and say, I know that person understands data and evidence, and will use the data, will use the evidence to drive the decisions forward. That's the only way forward, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's unfortunate right now. I look at the federal government, I look at our president, and I don't trust the words that come out of his mouth. I don't believe that he knows how to use data to drive a decision. I see him calling out Anthony Fauci, who in my mind as an infectious disease doctor is the source of truth in this current pandemic. I see him calling him out and saying that he's wrong. And I think that is only going to make our country less safe. It's only going to make parents less comfortable sending their kids to school and sending their kids to daycare. So I don't know if that answered. I'm trying to say, I think we've got to get new people in Washington, new people all across government that we can believe in and that we can trust. And then we have to empower those folks to use the data to make the right decisions.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, I think our next question goes to Emily Hajar. Emily, I'll find you. There you are.
Hello, Dr. Goldstein. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. So my question is, what do you hope, if elected, will be Congress's role in making sure the distribution of the COVID-19 vaccine is done equitably and ethically?
That's an amazing question. It's something I think about a lot. I guess I'll say ultimately, the distribution, the trial, the study of this vaccine is going to fall to the Food and Drug Administration. And for anyone who has followed this campaign or who knows me, I have really called out the Food and Drug Administration for a lack of equity and a lack of ethics when it comes to drug discovery, drug delivery, making sure that we're doing what's right in this country. So I think we need people in Washington who will hold the FDA accountable and provide the appropriate oversight. We've got to make sure that, first off, that this vaccine is studied in the right way. It is studied in the populations that are at high risk for COVID. That means making sure we get the vaccine and the studies into what are called safety net hospitals all across the country, hospitals that largely take care of Black and brown communities. We have to make sure that they are part of the study. They are part of the trial to make sure that this vaccine is safe and effective. We've got to make sure that once we have the vaccine, it is provided at no cost to people all across this country, and that cost is whatever the cost is, that it's not just going as a price tag to the federal government, but that we're actually negotiating and talking with the pharmaceutical industry and saying, we are going to keep the cost of this low because this is something that we need as a nation, and this is something that we need as a world, as the entire globe needs this. And then we've got to make sure that when it comes to distribution, that we can get it out. And we're going to have to recognize that our current healthcare system is racist. And our current healthcare system has very little equity in many ways. And so we've got to overcome that enormous barrier and make sure that we get this vaccine to folks all across the South, where there are less hospitals and people are less able to access care, into rural areas where hospitals are closing and people aren't able to access care, into the hospitals in the cities that don't have the infrastructure and the funding to bring people in and do the tracing that needs to be done to make sure that we can get the vaccine. So I think we're gonna have to rely on very important oversight of the Food and Drug Administration, very important oversight of the Department of Health and Human Services to make sure that this process is done equitably. It is done in a way that makes sure that everybody in this country gets the benefit of the vaccine, and not just those that are wealthy, those that are connected to power, those that are white. We got to make sure that everybody has access.
Thank you. Alicia, I just want to be cognizant of time. It's 7:28, and it looks like we have two more people who have questions, Joe
Yeah.
Murphy and Lindsay. So
Please, if we could get their questions in, that'd be appreciated.
great. Okay, Joe, let me find you. Okay, the floor is yours. Joe?
Joe? Joe Murphy, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, we gotcha.
Oh, okay, great. Dr. Goldstein, I read an opinion piece you wrote back in April where you pointed out that the promised research funding from the Affordable Care Act was twice reduced by Republican-controlled Congresses, both under Presidents Obama and Trump. I have a two-part question then. What effect do you think those reductions had in our ability to handle COVID? And as someone of expertise, what can you do if elected to restore that funding?
First, thank you for reading the article. It's always nice to know that when I put words out there that people read it. But just to sort of unpack that for people who maybe didn't read the piece, what I was calling out was that the Affordable Care Act set aside a certain amount of money each year to invest in our public health infrastructure. That over the time from 2010 to 2019 was really supposed to be around $8 billion of investment to make sure that the CDC had what it needed, to make sure the National Institutes of Health had what they needed, and to make sure that the National Security Council and our Emergency Preparedness Fund had what it needed. With each of those cuts that happened, the CDC, the NIH, and the NSC became weaker. And in fact, the NSC Emergency Preparedness Council was shut down completely. And so we went into 2020 with the absence of a global security plan around a pandemic. This is not because healthcare experts and infectious disease doctors didn't believe we would face a pandemic. We all knew that we would. We knew that this was a possibility. It was because Republicans were trying to cut funding and weaken the Affordable Care Act year after year. So I think we were left in an incredibly weak space where we didn't have the public health team to go out and do contact tracing across America. We didn't have partnerships with public health institutions in other countries to make sure that we were watching what was happening and could trace as the virus came to America. And then we certainly didn't have what we needed to roll out PPE and testing and all of the other interventions that were necessary to manage COVID. If I was in Washington back in 2019, I would have been loud and I would have been applying incredible pressure to the president and to Republicans saying, we are less safe. We as a nation are less safe. Public health is part of our national defense. And if we don't invest in that, we are making our country less safe. We now know the result of that, right? And so in January 2021, what we need to do is rebuild our public health infrastructure. recognizing where we are now, investing in our response to COVID, but also recognizing that we must prepare for the next public health crisis. We must be ready to fight what may come next. And if we're successful, we will actually never see another pandemic create this problem, because we'll have put in the necessary investment to build up our public health infrastructure.
Thank you, Joe, for your question. I think our last question goes to Lindsay Buckles, who has a question about federal student loan assistance.
Yes. Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for taking my question. So yeah, my question is just what your thoughts are on potential forgiveness of federal student loans. I know a lot of people have benefited from the federal student loans being frozen during this terrible time. And that's money that folks have been able to sort of supplement either job losses or pay reductions. And that money could be put towards saving, investing, the economy. So I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
So I think the current program that Ayanna Pressley pushed forward in the House is a fantastic program, and we've got to extend it for the duration of this pandemic and our emergency situation. And I think that's step one. Steps 2, 3, and 4, I'll share with you as well. I think we've got to come up with a student loan debt forgiveness program that explicitly and intentionally closes the racial wealth gap. We need to recognize that student loans right now are disproportionately impacting Black and Brown individuals who were forced into loans with high interest rates and with an inability to access the same programs that white students were able to access. And so our student loan debt forgiveness program must recognize that fact and really help to close that racial wealth gap. We've also got to recognize that for-profit colleges have done a lot of damage in this country, and a student loan debt forgiveness program must address all of that damage and really make sure that we are wiping out that debt for those people that went to for-profit colleges and at the end had very little to show from that experience. And then the last thing is that we've got to get to the root of the problem, right? Which is that college is too unaffordable. College is too expensive in this country. And if we're gonna tackle student loan debt, let's make sure that we don't just tackle it for this generation, let's fix it for the next, which means making sure that people have access to a high quality public education at no cost to them. That is our guarantee as a country, that we will provide education that should be available to folks as a college education. It should also be available to folks as a community college education, as a vocational school education, as an apprenticeship program, as whatever it takes to make sure people have the skills they need to enter the economy and enter the workforce after they leave college or whatever that education is.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your incredible questions. I think you can see, Doctor, that we have a very well-educated and informed group of Quincy Dems, and their questions were incredible, and we really appreciate you taking the time. If you'd like to make a closing statement in about a minute, we would love to hear from you. Thank you.
Well, I'll start by saying thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the amazing questions. I will also say that this is the start of a conversation. I said at the beginning, I want to have a conversation. I don't want it to end. So if people want to continue to ask questions, if you want to talk, if you have thoughts and ideas and suggestions, I am all ears and here to have that conversation. So the easiest way to do that is to join us on the campaign, to go to robbieforchange.com and sign up for our email list. You can email me directly and I'll find a time to talk with you. It's for you to volunteer with the campaign and spend more time where we can have more of these conversations. And I sort of welcome everyone and anyone to join us in that process. So thank you for having me tonight. And I think Megan, who works on the campaign, just shared some more information about how to reach us. And please, please do reach out.
Absolutely, will do. And thank you for all our Quincy Dems and beyond for participating. We have up to 42 participants tonight. It's wonderful. If we had held this at our local meeting, probably wouldn't have had that many people there, Doctor. So this has been a great advantage, and I hope everybody appreciates your being here and telling us about your candidacy. So thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone. I'll sign off and enjoy the rest of the night.